I now introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Srishti Batra, co-founder and CTO at QSense Labs. Uh, she is highly experienced in the field of neuroscience and sensory biology, both through her time at IISER Mohali and then her PhD at the National Center for Biological Sciences. Passionate about technology solutions and data, she has expertise in entrepreneurship life, science research, and data science. Her company QSense Labs was also founded in the same vein, with the goal of assuring food quality and transforming fresh food supply chain data. This biotechnology startup was also listed in the Forbes Asia 100 to watch list, standing testament to its astonishing growth. Without further ado, I request Dr. Patra to take over and enlighten us.
Thank you, Ritvik, for such a kind introduction. I don't know what is the format of this talk really is. So I had asked Diana that I would like it to be more interactive. I don't have any presentation here to show you, except maybe a couple of slides that we can go through. But I would just really first like to see if people can switch on their videos for at least a few seconds. That would be nice because I really like to see my audience. And just one more thing which I would like to know, is it mostly the student of IISER Kolkata or like bachelor students or PhD students, PhD scholars? Like what's the audience like?
Ma'am, we have mostly ICER students and they are from both BSMS and PhD.
Okay, so then I'll try to keep my talk actually very broad in that sense. Uh, Hello everyone, I'm Srishti. As Ritvik mentioned, I'm also an ICER alumni. I graduated from ICER Mohali. I'll actually just present a window here and can you guys see my screen?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Yeah. So I have like very few slides, just 3 slides to tell you about my journey, how I went on from ISA to QSense Labs. So it started with just this is something which I really love, which is quoted by Paulo Coelho in one of his book, which is that when you want something, the whole universe conspires in helping you achieve that. And this is something very inspiring to me. But I always used to wonder, how do I know what I want? I think that is something that I would always wonder, that how can such a motivational quote still leave me blank on what do I want? Because I would tell you, in every journey that I had taken, I had multiple plans, and I think it was never the plan A that worked. So that how I think the life goes on, and that's how actually I started at IISER Mohali as well. I came to IISER Mohali via IIT JEE exam because I was really hoping to get into the IITs, but somehow I couldn't get into the IITs of my choice. So using that rank, I went to IISER Mohali. Again, my plan B. I even had a plan C about it, which was Delhi College of Engineering, and I actually went there. I had started the classes in IISER Mohali. I took a gap of one few days and went back to Delhi College of Engineering, attended classes there, and then decided no, I want to stay in IISER Mohali. And I think that's how it's all started, that I sticked to research. Otherwise, I would have been very much into, I would say, as the people groups mentioned, that when you are an engineer, you are always building something and you are always looking around things. So it's a very different mindset that I think I made a choice that time. And when I was at IISER Mohali, actually, I was really enjoying doing this, which was setting up a lot of chemical reactions, purifying proteins, understanding what the proteins do in our body. So I had been into more of so I majored in biology over there. And then I went on to NCBS for a PhD. Again, PhD was not my first option. I was actually planning to give one more exam, but then I decided against giving that exam, which was to get me into the defense forces. And I decided, no, I want to pursue research. So I think throughout this thing, I always had this option that I could leave the research. And I always looked at that option as well, but then decided against it and stick to research. And I think similarly happened when I actually finished my PhD. And this is actually my complete PhD in one slide, where I studied sensory biology, I studied neurobiology, and I was very excited about brain, how our senses work. And that got me into something even more interesting, which was a postdoctoral opportunity at Harvard. Again, studying how uh, the neurons work in our system to give us a response to. So I am into sensory biology completely, and I enjoy poking around neurons, imaging neurons, and looking at how can this information is coded into our brain and how can we understand it. But when this opportunity came knocking to me, which was, it didn't came knocking, actually, I applied for it. This was a fellowship from the Lakshmi Mittal Family Group. And I was super excited about joining this place because I think Harvard had been my dream place to be at in terms of research. If I would say, it would be like a handful of places that everybody aspires to be. And Harvard is one of them. But at the same time, I was also looking at something that I want to do something which is even more bigger impact. Because as I had been into the research for over a decade, I had some personal experiences which really actually made me think about this decision again and again. The very first being that during towards the end of my PhD, from my collaborators, I faced a lot of ethical issues from this side. They were misusing my data, they were misinterpreting my data, and not even with discussing with me. And so I was like, no, that's not how the research should be. You have to be ethical. You cannot be plagiarizing somebody's data, and on the other hand, you cannot also be, so they were actually also publishing data which was falsified, which was fabricated, I would say. And I was too much against that. And I was having second thoughts whether I want to continue in research. And yes, second one being that, yeah, it's a really long journey. If I stay here to get to the faculty position, it's going to be pretty long. And I had some family responsibilities to look at as well. So, but the second opportunity that was coming to me was actually making a bit switch from doing what I had been doing a lot, like the biology, to building something like electronics and sensors. So that was actually my really big switch around the same time. And the difference between the time difference between these two images is that when I was presenting this poster, after 1 week, I built this sensor which is measuring the alcohol content in Budweiser. So it was, and that's why I wanted to show you both the pictures, because it's something that didn't that happened really quickly around my PhD that I was thinking around. And at the same time, I let go of the opportunity to be a postdoc at Harvard. And then I chose this, which is my current space, my current group, QZins Labs. And I would say that I have not regretted a single day of doing what I do over here. It's been an amazing journey, an amazing switch to be to made, which I made, and I'm really grateful that I took that plunge. It was not an easy plunge to enter into a startup ecosystem, or even to start a company. And I think I would discuss this in detail, but I would like to know if people have any questions first, because uh, then I would like to take the questions first, and then maybe we can take it forward from there.
Yes, ma'am. So I request the audience to just raise your hand so that I'll call out people, and then you guys can ask your questions. Okay, so as a start, like we have actually taken a few questions
Yeah.
from the responses of our audience. So I'll just pick them up and ask a few to start. So one question is, what skills should one learn for a job apart from normal curriculum?
Oh, okay. There are a lot of skills that you can learn apart from curriculum. One is definitely project management, because a lot of time the skills that you will learn in your curriculum will not translate to the skills that the company wants or the job wants. So anyway, you'll be learning a lot of skills from scratch. But what remains same is how do you manage your time? How do you manage your project? And also how do you manage people around you? Because you will not be so research is a very independent thing which you do as one person, setting up experiments, publishing and all that, while in a company it's the group effort that you look for. So I think the three things still remain: project management, time management and people management, that every company looks for. And I would definitely say, even when I am hiring, I am definitely looking for people who come and join our team to take ownership of that work, because if you do something then you have to own it to that, and that's also very important.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat box. We have a question from Satya Mahajan. How much of a risk it was for you to make this a huge turn in your career?
Oh, yeah, I think that I would say this question always comes to me every day actually. As we even grow, I think about startups are risky, and there is no denying in that. When I was actually switching from postdoc from NCBS PhD to the startup, I was actually, I would say I was putting a bet on something that in the Harvard, I had a postdoc opportunity with a very amazing scientist whom I really admired. And I was I was really excited about that. So one opportunity that I left off was a really good, great postdoctoral opportunity. The second was I was really scared of, if the startup fails, can I ever come back to what I did before? How does that gap in my academic career turn out for me? So that was a very huge risk that I was thinking about. The third risk was definitely in the terms of financials for myself, because when you are at an age of like 27, 28, you are thinking ahead of your career in terms of family, in terms of finances. And I had parents who are dependent on me. So my parents are still dependent on me, and I was always worried about that. I was never worried about that. What if I don't make enough money? But I was always worried about that. I don't want this tension to be on them, because I was paying their bills and I wanted to have enough stability to keep on paying their bills. So there was a lot of, but it was a calculated risk which I took. And I think I set up mechanisms as well, in case that if I don't succeed over there, that I had some channels made through which I could return to academia, or actually go into something which I would enjoy more. Because to be very honest, when I started a company, I had no knowledge of how even a corporate world works. And it was a very different experience for me, from opening bank account to registering company to uh, going to the customers and going to the investors. I remember I took my first customer interview in a BMTC bus in Bangalore, because I was so much, I really wanted to know if I'm entering into is good or not. So I found a customer in the bus, and generally I think people advise don't talk to random people on buses. But I think I took a lot of those steps which I would not recommend anybody to do. But still it is important that you calculate the risk that is involved for you. So, and then only enter into this.
Yes, ma'am. Uh, so we have Kushagra Advani has raised his hand. So Kushagra, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon. Ma'am, I have a question that how can you evaluate whether an idea is going to be successful or not, or it's worth it or not?
Yes, so I think that's what I was coming to. So if you have an idea, the best thing to know is to go to the customer. Talk to
Yeah.
the customer. Does the
Yes, ma'am.
customer want it or not? And if there can be a lot of potential customer, talk to as many of them as you can. That is something very important, because a customer is someone who can either make your business or break your business. If you build an amazing product but there is nobody there to buy it, then you can't go further. But
Yes,
but if people really need something, they would encourage you to make that for them. So that's, I think, very important to know if an idea is good or not. Along with that, look into the market potential of it. So you don't want that you are only selling it to 3 to 4 people. You want to sell it to masses.
yes, ma'am. Knowing about the market is very important.
Yes, knowing about the market is very important. Knowing about your customer is very important. Knowing about who is going to be the user of it. So there are two things whenever you are building something from scratch or you are looking into a startup idea. First, who is going to use it? Second, who is going to pay for it? And the third thing is, are there enough people who will be able to pay for it?
Yeah, okay.
So these are the, I would say, the three major criteria that initially can help you validate or invalidate your ideas. And then you can iterate from that. And a lot of time, if you just go to the customer, don't even pitch your idea. Listen to their problem first. So
Yes, ma'am.
listen to their problems, then you try to put in your solution into it, and then see how do they respond. Are they excited about your solution? Are they not excited about it? Or if they want any minor changes or major changes in what you are thinking can be a good product, they will really help you there.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
So we have another question from Ravi Vishwakarma. Hello, Srishti. Really, thank you for coming to us and sharing experience. A question from my side: having the confidence to leave academic is sometimes too much because academics does not make us ready for corporate, does not make us corporate ready. So, do you feel this, and any tips to overcome it?
I think that's very good. I would say that's definitely there that academics, if you have been in academics for quite long, you don't feel that you are corporate ready, but it's actually a myth, I would say, because during academics, you pick up a lot of skills about managing people, presenting your work, presenting yourself. And corporate is also about about interacting with the people that you would end up working with or forming a company with or your investors. So a lot of people skills still remain there. The difference, I would say, how to come over, any tips to overcome it. I think there is one very simple tip to overcome that kind of hindrance. Especially for me, I didn't know anything about the corporate language. The terms that the people were using, I was like, I just don't know what does this mean. You can ask me what is a single neuron recording, I can tell you, but I don't know what is this term mean. So I think there was a lot of language difference, which I felt was very different. But I think a very easy way to overcome is that very politely discuss with people and raise questions. Because if you don't understand anything, just ask. That is the best thing that you can do to get incorporated into that corporate structure. And I think initially I felt it a bit. Now I don't feel it anymore. I think I have become way more comfortable in approaching people and talking to them and discussing my ideas, my product. So those things have eased out now. And I think as an academic, we are very much into like, we just want to talk to the group of people like our lab or ATMEX, our institute, and that's it. But when you are in the corporate world, you are actually talking to a lot more people, reaching out to people. People will be reaching out to you. So you have to understand that balance on managing that. That's a bit different.
Okay, ma'am. So we have another question from Abhirup Chauhan. You are an entrepreneurship first fellow. How did you get into that right after your PhD?
Okay, yeah, I think so. As this question is coming up, I'll try to go to the second part of my talk, which I was planning to, which is on something when you start a company, what are you looking for? So I think I already answered a question of Kushag, as in when you're looking at the company, what is an idea is like. So my actually startup journey started at Entrepreneur First, not after my PhD, during my PhD. So I joined Entrepreneur First during the last semester of my PhD to explore the ideas of finding a co-founder, finding a startup idea. And this was a very organic journey for me because I had friends and colleagues who were actually at Entrepreneur First Singapore. And some of them were actually IISER Kolkata alumni. So I talked to them about it and discussed with them that how their experience have been and what kind of opportunities uh, does that bring. So, because Entrepreneur First at that time had just launched in the India, and their first program was happening in Bangalore, and I was planning to apply for it. So I knew about Entrepreneur First from friends and colleagues, and that's when I started looking into them as a potential place where I would like to meet a co-founder and start a company. The program was really good. You come in without any idea, without any founder. You meet talented people over there. So that's where I met my co-founder, Rubal. She was also in the cohort, and she's an electronics engineer. So we were discussing about synergies between biology and electronics. And that's where the idea of QSense actually started. And we worked on one more idea as well, but that idea got invalidated by customer very soon. So that's when I would say, Kushag, if you have an idea, go and talk to the customer. And that's when we knew that that idea is not going to work because the customer is not looking for that, what we were thinking. And that's when we pivoted and we came to what we are working now because we had a vague idea, as in, this is a problem. This is a huge problem in the fresh food supply chain that there is no data. Are people doing anything about this? Are people collecting quality data? Are people using any IoT or any sensors to look into what is happening in their warehouses or in their supply chains? We just had this thing that we can help it with my knowledge of sensory biology. If we can convert certain part of sensory biology from lab based to IoT based, and then they would be ready for industrial products. So we knew that the product is possible, but we didn't know if there is a requirement for it. So what we actually did was write to CXOs, CEOs, any people in the fresh food supply chain. If we could get their email, we would send them an email. We will ping the people on LinkedIn. And I think that's where my first hesitation from the academic world went off, which is sending out emails to unknown and to actually big shot people who might not even care about responding to my email. And but to our surprise, we got our 90% emails and LinkedIn messages responded back within a week. So that was sort of a validation that we are on the right path and we should explore it more. So I think that's how the initial journey of anything that you want to start up is. You want to, because you're looking at a bigger impact, whether people want to use it or not. And I think even now, I would say, if you're building something, you have to be on ground. So there are these fancy things. I see people fantasize about startups being, you can work from anywhere, you can work from a garage, and this company started in a garage, this company started in a 2 BHK, and all those things. But what happens actually when they're starting up in the garage or even in the 2 BHK, they're doing a lot of groundwork. So my initial memory of startup, I would say, is ordering books from Flipkart. That was in Isar Mohali. I used to order a couple of books from Flipkart. That time Flipkart was really new and I had no idea what a startup is, to be very honest. I had just heard this is this new company, Flipkart. You can buy books from there. That's amazing. And then my friends were using Freecharge at that point. So I think everybody knows Kunal Shah over here and the success of Freecharge. But when I first got to know about the Freecharge, I found it that this is such a crappy idea. They are giving you coupons, they're not making any money. How is this company even going to sustain? So I had no idea about what the startup mindset is when I was actually in ISER. And I was finding that this is not a sustainable business model. But as I started learning more about the startup world, as the years went by, we have now know the success story of Flipkart, success story of Freecharge. So I think now there is a lot of awareness about it, that what can be converted into a successful venture. So what we are looking in the startup world is something which can scale up, which can have a huge impact on the lives of people, and that's way more important. So when you are building something, when you are trying to build a company, you are looking at the most impact that your users can have, because that gives you the success. So that's very important. On whichever idea you are working on, think of 100x. think of if the customer is doing it now, how can my technology or my product help them 10x or 100x? Because that's when the customer is willing to make a switch to your product. So that's very important. And that's how you will learn your journey towards it. And I think rest of the other things will fall in place as you go along. So that's very important over there. Okay, I see the next question is how much difficult it was to raise funds for the company. I would say that we were initially actually funded by Entrepreneur First itself. They funded us with a pre-seed capital. But I would say that in the current scenarios compared to the last 10 years from 10 years ago to now, raising funds is not, it is difficult. It is very difficult. But right now there is a lot of VCs and a lot of angels around in the startup community. So the opportunities are also more, though it is still difficult. I think I always think that I remember when we were raising our seed round, it was the first lockdown. And at that time, none of the VCs, none of the angels, they were interested in putting any money anywhere because they had no idea what the coronavirus pandemic is going to do. And I was personally really scared. What will happen? We have to raise funds, and if the mentality doesn't change in the VCs that they are not willing to put money anywhere right now, then how will we grow as a company? Because we would need funds in the coming months, and it's quite difficult. I think, yeah. And that point, I think I was even uh, having thoughts about how my next few months would work out. It's difficult. So how to get grant for patent filing before launching a product? Actually, you don't need a grant for patent filing. You just need to pay the patent fees and those things, which would be about, I would say, a less than lakh to begin with. So if you can manage those kinds of funds, you don't really need anything for patent filing. And you can actually also do patent filing when you are developing your product as well. So that would also work pretty well with the government because you have already filed the dates gets registered over there. So, okay, somebody has asked, can we ask the question? Okay, I think this is to you, Ritvik, that somebody has.
Yes, ma'am, that has been addressed. So Karthikeya asked the question, could you please tell us about effect of location, if it is in village or city, on our idea and the potential business of it?
I think it depends on what kind of company you are looking at. I started my company in Bangalore, but we are really serving people in different areas of the country and also planning to go global now. So, and I would say a very successful story is Zoho, which is actually based out of a rural area. So it all depends what you are reaching out to. I always recommend being closer to your customers because in the initial few years, you will be going to your customers like every other day. I still go to my customers' location. I still go to warehouses. I go to their offices, their transportations, the mandis, because we are in the agri supply chain. So I am at like every place even now. So I think tomorrow, day after tomorrow also, I'm visiting one warehouse of the agri. And so the distance in that way helps a bit. If I'm still working in the very initial stages, it really helps. Otherwise, if you're building something which is more of an internet product and you just you don't care that you can reach out to people through internet, then it doesn't matter even if you are in village.
So if any more people with questions, you can raise your hand and ask it. Okay. So, ma'am, it was actually a really nice talk where it was very inspiring. We all need like this kind of inspiration once in a while. Okay, we have a new question. I'm sorry, by Aniket Sarkar. How do you evaluate whether an idea is worth it or will it be successful?
So yeah, Aniket, again, if you want to know if idea is worth, go to your customer. Identify who is your customer. That is the most important thing. And then only you'll get to know if the customer is willing to pay for it. So I think that's something that really defines if it is going to be successful or not. Uh, okay, I see the next question coming. The first step to successful startup is a good core team. So, how to build a perfect team and how you got your core team members? Okay, I would say, Abhirup, we are still building our core team. It is very difficult to get the core team right in the very first attempt. The secret to building a really core team that you want is that you should be able to trust them with your customers, trust them that they will handle your customers very nicely if they're working on that. If they're working on the tech, then you really want them, they give their 100% to it. And that's very, very important. So we built our core team over years, I would say. And the one best way to have, I would say, is first you look into the cultural fit if they fit to your organization. Definitely you look into the skills as well. The second thing is that sometimes you will end up hiring wrong people. So then fire them. I think that's the best thing, or maybe don't have them as your core members. So hiring fast and firing fast is one rule which I would say is very important. And how did I got my core team members? I would say the very first member I actually got from my team was from NCBS itself, and that person was actually an intern in my lab where I was doing PhD, and her internship was getting over. So I just asked her, "Do you plan to do something after this internship?" And she said, "No, I don't have anything. I will look. I might apply for PhD exams." Then I told her, "Okay, so you have 6 months. Come work with me for 6 months. I'll give you a stipend, and then if you want to give the PhD entrance exam, you give." And I think that person has been the strongest core member in our company till now, and now she has no plans of doing PhD. So I think that's how the very first member in our core team came, and rest I think followed slowly when we talked to a lot of people, interviewed a lot of them, and maybe and also via networking. Okay, what are the some ways of getting into a biotech industry as a researcher in computational biology and bioinformatics? Actually, Pavni, if you are into computational biology and bioinformatics, there are a lot of industry options. So, not just I would say startups, but there are a lot of companies now who are looking into the sides of genomes and antibiotics or antibodies. So there are a lot of opportunities, especially for bioinformaticians, I would say, and computational biologists, more than the molecular biologists, which I have come across throughout my career. Because with the tools and the knowledge that you have, you can venture into a lot of different sides of biotech, which would be not just analyzing sequences and analyzing protein structures, but also on the sides of building ML pipelines and data pipelines, because a computational biologist and bioinformatics have a really strong understanding of statistics and the modeling part, data modeling part. So those kinds of roles are also available now. And if you pitch yourself to the company the right way, not very corely as a bioinformatician or a computational biologist, then making those switches even to parallel industries become easy. So it's just how you place yourself to that opportunity that comes to you. Okay, what have been your most significant failures and the lesson you learned from them? Okay, I think I would say there have been a lot of failures throughout the journey, starting from I would say being in school to being in college to being in PhD. There have been a lot of failures, and the lessons that I always learn from them: whenever you fail, just don't take it on heart. That's the easiest thing that you can do, because if you take it on heart, then it is very difficult to recover from the failures. I know I was devastated when I didn't get into IIT of my choice, and I felt like this is the biggest failure because I spent so much time and energy preparing for it. But I didn't think too much on that, and then I just looked at what is the best I can do of my current opportunities. So I think having different plans really help, because if you're stuck on just plan A, and if that plan A fails, it's devastating. But if you have plan B, C, D, it really helps. So that's very important. Yeah. Okay. So Karthik is asking, does pharmaceutical and chemical companies compete with biotech startups? And if so, how to stand out differently from them in the market? So I would say not necessarily they compete with biotech startups, pharmaceutical and the chemical companies. Like there are a lot of companies, even for us, who are bigger companies and might also be competition to us. But always think of this thing: if you are a startup, there is always a bigger fish in the tank. So if you see when the Android came, markets were already flooded with Nokia's Windows phones and other things. But even those bigger companies don't see startups as a threat, and startups should also not see them as a threat, because a startup is doing something unique which this bigger companies, pharmaceutical or the chemical companies, won't be doing it, because for them to make that switch to a startup idea is way more costlier, so they will never take that risk. So I'll give an example for that. You will see recently a lot of companies are working on, post covid, are working on designing antibodies. So I think there are bigger pharmaceutical companies who would be working on antibodies design, like Syngene, Biocon, but they actually don't see these startups as a competition. They see these startups as something which they can build something for the ecosystem. And if they actually fit to these big companies, most of the time the big companies will come and acquire them. So for startups also, it's a good strategy to exit if they are looking for exit. If the startup is not looking for an exit and is looking to grow even further, then also these companies are not a threat to them. So that's very different. And I think the way you will stand out different from them in the market is that you will be doing something unique in which they would not be putting in their money and effort. Okay, so for startup, is technical and computer knowledge as well as mathematics really essential requirements? Can we go along for startup even if we are not good in these areas? You can definitely go around building startups even if you're not good in these areas. I'll assure you, you need to be a good leader. That is the most important thing. You can find people to write codes for you. You can find people to do mathematics for you. But the thing is that you have to lead. You have to have a vision where you want to take your company. So that is most important thing. And in my case especially, I have no so in ICER there used to be a course of electronics. I had a C grade in that. I had never built anything other than a breadboard circuit with resistor and getting some voltage and current readings and just proving V is equal to IR. And now my startup is all about building electronics, IoTs, and building the complete AI platform. I have been into data science as a PhD researcher, building models around my biological data, but now my team and we are building models for huge data sets coming from the agri supply chain. Again, a very different data set. So you cannot have skills in everything. I think that is something that you have to accept, that you are good at something and you only focus at that part. And for rest other, you build a team. So the only thing you have to have is a vision and where you want to take your company to.
Okay, so this was a very interactive session. Thank you all for the questions. If anyone still has any questions, you may ask. Or
I think I would like to add one thing to this audience to think upon, which is something I think has changed uh, a lot of my outlook towards the working opportunities and just about the world in general, which is that you have to identify opportunities. Look into the opportunities which are coming to you, and even if you don't know anything about them, but if you think it is a really good opportunity, say yes to it, and then you figure out how you can do that, because there are ways. I know this audience is a really smart audience coming from ICERs, IITs, and national institutes. So figuring out is something that we are really good at, and even at researchers, because when we start a research project, we know nothing about it. We start from unknown, and from there we build build our projects. So I think that is very important that you identify the opportunities and accept them. Don't let the opportunities go. There, I would say, a huge cost of opportunity that we then suffer and we realize it later. And the second thing I would say is that whenever you are looking at a problem, don't look at I will try to do this or even anything. Like if somebody asks you, can you do this? Yeah, just don't say I will try to do this. If that is a great opportunity, then you just say I'll get it done, and you find out how to get it done. So that's very important, and I think that leads you on a very long journey. And another thing is when you are working on a startup, I would say few things to always keep in mind is that you are solving for a customer. So whatever you are thinking your product or your ideas should be, it should be solving something for the customer in your mind. Secondly, you have to be on ground. When I mean on ground is anything that your idea or your work involves, which would mean that you are on ground interacting with customers, interacting with end users, and all those things. Another thing is startup is a 24/7 work. Even though I'm giving this talk at the back of the head, I'm thinking about one. I'm thinking about that my team is currently at a warehouse of the customer, and I want to know what they are doing. So I'm constantly engaged in my startup. It doesn't matter if it is a Saturday or a Sunday. So you have to adjust your lifestyle to that. And because otherwise you will be drained. So you have to make a balance of that, that when you are working on the startup, you are able to manage yourself, your mental well-being, your family well-being, your social well-being, everything. So take into account it would be a lifestyle change. Another thing is collaborate and share work. That's when I said you don't have to be expert on everything. You build a team around it. Collaborate, share work. Most importantly, if you are an entrepreneur, you have to lead them into the right direction. So that's very, very important to do when you are starting your own company. Apart from that, I would also like to say, though my talk has been more about starting up your own company, I would also give you a few tips if you are, because not everybody want to do a startup, and that's completely fine. Like that's okay. We are mostly also looking for opportunities that we can have outside of research or outside of academia. So what do we take from academia which will help us adjust to that corporate lifestyle? The most important thing I would say is people management, which I've said earlier as well. The second is getting things done attitude. Identify opportunity, say yes, and then figure out how you will get it done. Take ownership of any project that you get involved with. So all the skills will help you transition into the corporate world, into the job opportunities quite easily and maintain there. Second thing is how do you position yourself to that company? So have a CV in a way in which you are able to put your this interpersonal skills, not just your curriculum. So I remember I had a CV when I was at ICER. It was 5 pages long, and it would tell about each and every project which I did on cancer genome, or which I did on acute amyloid cancer, which I did on protein networks. But nobody is looking for that in the industry. What they are looking for that is from that is what is something that I learned in that project which might be helpful to the industry. I should put that as a highlight. So something like I was able to take a protocol which takes 3 months to something like 3 weeks. So I speeded up the process. Uh, so if you are good at managing process, you can say that you can speeden up their processes. What was the outcome like? Was it a in terms of efficiency, in terms of time, or in terms of anything that you measure? So those kinds of skill, if you put more on your CV, that academic CV then can be converted into a CV for the industry. So that also really helps to position yourself for industry. And yeah, that is something that I would like to add on. And yeah, that's it from my side, I would say.
Ma'am, we have just another a small question. Is there any network community of ICERites who are in entrepreneurship?
I would say I have a very small. There is, I won't say it's like a properly formed organization of ice rights and entrepreneurship, but I am in touch with 2 to 3 entrepreneurs from ICER Kolkata and couple of them from ICER Mohali who have been my friends or juniors or colleagues. So Only that's it. I don't think so. There is any formal um, commu- community like that.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Uh, this was really inspiring, ma'am. Like every one of us needed to see a real life example, uh,
Hmm.
how you achieved your dreams. So, for anyone who was demotivated in their spirits to become an entrepreneur, this must have helped them a lot. Thank you, ma'am, for taking out your time also because, as you said, you are very, very busy, and it is a real honor to have you here. I would request the ECEL ICER Kolkata team to just switch on their cameras because we would take a screenshot, which is the new group selfie now.
Yeah, that has
So
become the new norm.
I would request only the ECEL team to switch on their cameras, please. Uh, okay, ma'am. So we have the team here. So I'll just take a screenshot. Just a second. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
guys.
Ma'am, ma'am, one more
Uh,
question.
yeah.
Ma'am, how can we utilize ICER's full potential for our startup and especially ICER Mohali?
Okay, so I'll tell you to be very honest, when I was at ICER Mohali, I think I had very limited opportunities over there in terms of career outside of academia. And I think ICER's mandates is that they will promote research. So they would not let non-research opportunities come to you. I think now they have become quite flexible about it. But instead of just relying on ICER, I think I would say you go out and reach out to people via other ways. You can reach out to them on LinkedIn, you can reach out to them on other social media platform. You can ask them for internships which are maybe not in the research segment if you're looking outside of research. So I think that's something would really help because or like yeah, I think that would be the best thing. I don't know if currently ICERs are allowing internships outside of academia as an opportunity via ICER. So that something is was very different for me. But now I know I have a junior from ICER Mohali who started his company quite, I think, just after 2 years of graduating from ICER Mohali, and that was also mostly that he went to a B school, and after that he started it. I'm not so sure currently what are the opportunities at ICER. It's been like I graduated in 2014, so that's been a quite a long time to know what is currently going on there. Yeah. But I can definitely assure you one thing. People do find ICER students to be quite motivated and self-driven. So if you reach out to them for internship opportunities, and if the skill set match, people will hire you for internships. And I think that's a very good start when even when you are studying to get an exposure to that how it is to work on a live project for a customer or for a company. That's a very good exposure. I know a lot of fellow startups who have hired physicists who are currently studying in ICER to do small projects for them because they are a deep tech startup and they just don't want any computer science engineer. They want trained physicists to do certain experiments for them, and those really help. And I
Okay,
think
ma'am.
I would also say because I think I'm even ECEL can actually do that. We are actually always looking for having some really good interns to work with us on different aspects of software programming to data science to building, I would say, R&D projects as well. So do you can forward them that they can send out their resume to hr@qzins.com, and my team would definitely look into them. And as we would look into for opportunities, we might reach out to them because we are always looking at expanding team. So that would be great.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And uh, now we